I am Daniel Leakes, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's the author of Judge of Mystic Saga series, no other than Miss Sapha Burnell.
Hi, and hello, everybody. My name is Sapha Burnell. I am a cyberpunk and mythpunk author of the Judge of Mystic Saga, including Char and Ash, Son of Abel, Book of Revels, and the upcoming book Gnungagap. It's so wonderful to listen and to be here for everybody today.
Yes, so before we go to the last part of your series, let's do the recap of all the books of Judge of Mystic Saga.
So it starts off with Char and Ash. Char and Ash's book one. It's currently available out in paperback and digital right now. It starts off with the mystic realms keeping a tenuous peace after centuries of war. Forged into the realm's only judge, demigod Caleb Matheson is both peacemaker and executioner of the mystic truce. When Caleb is called to the charred remains of a scorched sacred grove outside Dover, rumors reignite tensions as Ares warns of war's whisper. High Queen Celica is hiding something in the roots and petals of her fey courts, and it smells of char and ash. Book one is a fantastic adventure. It is a work of mythpunk, so it's basically kind of, I think you could call it urban fantasy. We've got that convergence of different mythologies, while at the same time having familiar locations like Vancouver and Dover, places that people can actually go to and understand. And it has Caleb Matheson, who teams up with his wife, Tuya Dragonova, to solve this mystery before it's too late and before the villains learn how to kill the gods. And so it's quite an adventure. I love it. And then we follow that up with Son of Abel. Son of Abel is book two. And this was originally released in 2017. And then we realized that the world building around Son of Abel was so rich and so amazing. We really needed to go back, ground people in what the situation actually was, and add to it and open it up a little bit, not have it just so insular on Caleb. So Char and Ash and the rest of the books of the series came out of those conversations with my editor and I. And then Son of Abel was given a revamp and 45,000 more words. So
Oh,
it expanded incredibly. So do please make sure you get the new cover version, the one from 2023, which has just an epic amount of new material. And I'm quite proud of what Son of Abel has become. And it starts off with Caleb being like, I want out, and the entire cosmos hiccups around Finnegan the Fae as Caleb is saying this. Caleb is desperately clinging to this journal of a 7th century cardinal, obsessed with a magical tattoo that threatens to crumble the mystic realms to wrath and war, a place they know and fear too well. And spiraling with only his scheming ex Delilah to quote unquote help, Caleb searches for the elusive way out of the truce as he descends through the essence of grief into layers of hell on earth. Finnegan breaks his exile, and we get to see a lot of comedy and a lot of humor out of Finnegan here. So there's definitely still a balance with the emotion, which is something I always promise. And he goes to find Caleb's absentee father, Raynar, to wrench Caleb loose before his absence strips the realms of their judge and protector, and before Delilah weaves Caleb into plans of her own and wrath shatters through the last roots of the world tree. So, Son of Abel is passionate. It is incredibly emotional. It still has those breaths of humor. It still has those little bits of relief, but it is the most emotionally grounded in grief and different sort of emotions like that of all the books. So this is the Valley. And now, after the Valley, once we go through the journey of Son of Abel, then and through the storyline of Caleb realizing that he should not and cannot do this alone, And he actually does go for help. And that is when we start seeing a little bit more and a little bit more of climbing out of the valley into the mountains, which starts us off with Book of Revels, book 3. Book of Revels is where we finally see Stana, the villain of Char and Ash, get her comeuppance. And so we get to have that experience of tracking Stana down, tracking all the people down. And not only that, but Caleb meets the character of Lilith, a precocious, rebellious 13-year-old delinquent who gets kicked out of boarding school for punching a teacher. And he ends up taking her under his wing. Uh, of course, her mother is the quite villainous Delilah. So that always makes things fun. Delilah told Caleb, go get my daughter. I'm busy. I'm not going to do it. You do it. And they discover that they're family. And so Caleb ends up traveling around with Lilith. He learns a bunch of secrets about their mutual past. And then by the end of Book of Revels, we have a massive battle, which I'm really excited about people getting to read. You will be able to read Book of Revels on October 3rd. I'm so excited. I think everyone's going to love what happens. I really do. So that book is going to be a lot of fun. It concludes with this massive battle, which I really enjoy writing. I'm like, yes, give me the battle scenes. Where can I add some open pugilism as a martial artist and as a historian? I love me a good battle. And then the ending of Book of Revels swoops Caleb and Lilith away off into basically their home called the Hallows, which brings us to Ginnungagap. Now, Ginnungagap sounds like a very funny word. Really, it's that chaos, that void, before everything was created. So, in various mythologies and various cosmogonies, you have that idea of, God upon the face of the waters, or Eurynome dancing upon the waters before creating the universe egg, or the waters of Zeptepi, and you kind of get that sense in most mythologies. Everything starts with this black dark void, and in the Norse culture, that dark void, that gap, is called Ginnungagap. And it is that dark void before the beginning of everything. And so I had to use it. I had to bring in my Norse culture. It's a fantastic word once you know what it is. But I know a lot of people are like, what in the world? What is this noise?
Yes.
What are you? It's a great way to educate people on Norse cosmogony and things like that. Basically the giant Ymir getting released from the ice. He ends up getting licked out of the ice by a cow called Olumla. And that's basically how the Norse universe really gets started. It gets started by this, just a cow in the middle of a void, in the middle of this conflagration between fire and ice, and then Ymir, who is the parent, the father and mother of giants, and then Bur, who ends up getting licked out of the ice too, who ends up becoming, the father of Buri, who ends up becoming the father of Odin, and then all this. So I was able to kind of bring it back. Ginnungagap is bringing us into Norse mythology in a way that we've started out very vague in Char and Ash, a little bit more into Norse myth and Son of Abel. We get to hear the story of the death of Balder. We get to, see what's happening with the sons of Thor, Magni and Moti. And then Book of Revels, we're kind of dealing with some other things, but that stuff is in the background. We're seeing Thor for the first time in Book of Revels. And then when we get to Ginnungagap, we are almost incredibly kind of almost cloistered into Norse myth because Caleb is the grandson of Thor. So we're going from that place of sort of out there away in the Utengard, in that outside place, and slowly bringing Caleb and his daughter and his father into that Innengard, into that inner place where family and society really just kind of is revived in Ginnungagap. So it is another form of that place of healing when you are finally able to, as prodigals or as people who have had disconnection, which is really what the stories are about, as that feeling of coming home.
Gap. Can we compare to Mr. Neil Gaiman Norse mythology?
I think so, yes. I think you can compare Ginnungagap to Norse mythology. I think Neil Gaiman does such an incredible job of telling those stories. And I love Norse mythology. I love listening to the audiobook by Neil Gaiman. I just think that it's luscious and fantastic. When you're going into the Poetic Eddas and the sagas and everything like that too, the extant information that we have sometimes contradicts each other, but for the most part, just has this rich storytelling where there's lots of room to kind of embody and play, to play around in it and things like that. And, of course, when it comes to folklore and mythology, my personal philosophy on it is that there are so many different versions of oral traditions because so many different people have spoken them. And so we get that sense of variation that we can play with. But when you get to something like Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, when you get to that book, all of a sudden it's as if there is now a island of solid granite in the middle of a sea of different variations of the tales. And you have that sort of grounding mechanism to go, okay, here we go. From here, we can look out and see what all those variations are. But I love how grounded he is and his voice and how, the emotion is there. There's also that bit of humor. I quite enjoy Neil Gaiman's work. I have ever since Neverwhere, first book of his that I read. And I'm sure that, there has been some influence about how he brings mythology into works. And growing up, watching, that's the wrong word, reading Sandman and Neverwhere and, kind of going from there into the career I've gone into, I absolutely think that there is even a tonal, homage, to what Neil Gaiman does. Although, of course, Ginnungagap is a work of modern literature, as in, this is basically taking place in 2017.
This is the latest version.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the Judge of Mystic Saga takes place in 2017. And so the technology, people are not on TikTok doing TikTok dances. It's like, I got this for my Instagram. Oh, what iPhone were we
So,
at on that in
yes.
2017?
So,
Yeah.
Miss Burnell, do you think that the brain of Miss Madeline Miller and Mr. Neil Gaiman, you combine together in these saga books?
I think Yeah, I think the emotional vulnerability and the tenderness that Madeline Miller produced in the Song of Achilles, that sort of inner vision on these larger than life heroic figures, the concentration on their emotional lives. I definitely think that I concentrate quite substantially on the emotional lives of my characters. Sometimes to the exclusion of most other things. I really need to get those emotional scenes in there. And I think that sense of play and adventure that you get in Neil Gaiman's work, that sense of grounding in mythology, this is what the myths say, so this is what we're going with, even, as we talked about in Char and Ash, even when it comes to figures like Zeus, what do you do with Zeus? Well, Zeus is Zeus, I'm sticking with the myths, but I'm also putting him in a diaper, in an adult diaper in a nursing home, and there's where he can stay. Uh, Funny enough, there was a reviewer on Goodreads who talked to almost their entire review was, "Oh my gosh, laugh at Zeus, read this book." Yes, that is exactly what I wanted. Uh, but I think that when you can kind of look at my body of work here, when you look at the quartet, you can see that emotional vulnerability, that toughness, which comes from seeing where decisions originate, seeing the connection between people, seeing the inner lives, the friendships, the lovers, the frustrations that you get in Song of Achilles. And then you also, on the other hand, see these sort of somewhat off kilter rebellious adventures that you get from Neil Gaiman's work. And all with that breath of mythology handled as I have been taught and as I've learned to handle mythology, kind of connecting things together. So, in Book of Revels, we meet Thor for the first time. In Ginnungagap, we really get to see Thor. We get to see more of Odin. Odin has been sort of a background figure in Son of Abel. We get to see him in one scene, him and Frigga, his wife. And then it isn't until Ginnungagap that you really start seeing these figures. We get to see Sif, and Sif, not the Marvel version of Sif, but the mythology version of Sif, where she's got golden hair, and she's this fertility goddess, this goddess of the grains and agriculture, and she's one tough mama. Just because she's got the long golden hair doesn't mean she's not tough. She's still a Scandinavian woman that has survived centuries of cold winters and brutal springs. She just does it in a very kind of not necessarily soft, but strong feminine way. And she still
Yes.
has that tenderness. She is that tender emotion in Thor. She is also that tender emotion in herself as a mother who, as we find out in Son of Abel, had to give up her two sons. Because in the action of Son of Abel, we find out that the sons of Thor, Magni and Moti, were taken away from their parents and sent to Midgard, aka the world of the humans. And that's the moment that broke the family. That's the moment of disconnection. And so in Ginnungagap, you've got this massive gap, this incredible space between, which I'm using the actual Ginnungagap as a symbol for. And then it is that moment of coming together and repairing that loss and repairing that and healing the family. And then through healing of family, once that family unit is, maintained and they come together and they find a place to just be as a family, then they are strong enough and able enough to take on the evils that are still lurking. Cormac of the Willow is still lurking. We haven't dealt with him yet. We still have that massive villain who has been taking half of the fairies, half of the fae, and turning them against every mammal, against every fauna instead of the flora, which they are. So we still have battles to fight, but those battles are more accomplishable when you come together as a family unit, when you come together as this collection of societal units, because again, we have so many different mythologies in these books. We've got everything from Taoist and Hindu and Shinto all the way to Norse and Hellene and sort of that northern swath of Africa. We've got all of these different mythological groups who eventually come together and come together in a way where they're like, yeah, you know what, we have differences, but we absolutely all want our children to survive and thrive. We absolutely all want everybody to be able to take those deep breaths and live in their world, and not only live, but live well. And so we all have to come together and we all have to, find that place where it's not just a truce, it is a bond. And that really is the story of Ginnungagap. And by the end of that book, that's where we leave Caleb and his family. We leave them in a place where in Charnash, we see the mystic truths as a whole bunch of different disparate groups all challenging each other to play nice. And by the end of it in Ginnungagap, we come together as more as people welcome at each other's tables. Mhm.
Interesting, Miss Burnell. But before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening in Spain. Muchas gracias, Spain. In Andalusia, I got 47 audience share. Catalonia, 15%. Madrid, the capital, I got 13%. Valencia, Navarre, Galicia, Balearic Island, Castile de Leon, Basque County, Murcia, Canary Island. Oh, I love Canary Islands. Thank you for listening to my podcast. Principality of Austrias, Aragon, and last but not the least, Cantabria. Thank you, Spain. Muchas gracias todos. Spain for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world like me, Sapha Burnell. So, Miss Burnell, if we talk about Miss Madeline Miller and Neil Gaiman, how about the timeless mythology by Edith Hamilton. If you compare the Saga books, there are similarities.
Honestly, it's been a while since I've read Mythology by Edith Hamilton. I think, you know, the accuracy that she used to create, her books, that timeless, the scholarship that she went into in order to get them, not necessarily politically correct, but right. I absolutely think, yeah, that would match quite well. I do look at mythology as the way it was at its time within the context of the time periods in which these myths were told and in which these myths were believed, not just told, but believed, and especially when we get into Norse mythology, because so many works of Norse myth were not written down until Christians were writing it, and you have that exterior lens upon all of these tales that you kind of have to see through a little bit. I think that Edith Hamilton's work in basically writing these things down, in looking at them, looking at the translations, and writing down what was present, not necessarily what, in the 1940s people would have been like, oh yes, this is exactly the way that I would want to see a story on this wonderful figure. It's like, no, she's being as accurate as she can. That scholarship is unparalleled for a reason. I do look at mythology within those lenses as much as possible, of choosing the options which match them to what we have in the past. So, we have those moments where, again, going back to Charnash with Zeus is that guy. He is that guy that has all of those myths where you're like, "Ee, Zeus, you're terrible." Like, "Oh, that's not nice. I don't want to think about that." Like, "Oh, you turned into a swan and then oh dear." We still have those moments, but this is, a few thousand years later. Where is he now? And that's where I get my chance to play. So even Ares, do I start the myths off? And we'll see this in Agape Maki, which is an origin story on Ares and Aphrodite that is coming out in 2024. I start Ares off as that angry, upset war god, the thrashing young man going, "You don't trust me, you don't like me, not even my own father will help me," that angry teenager thrashing around, but he's got enough power that when he thrashes, the world ends up in war, things that are not very savory, not very nice. And then through a series of events, Ares starts to grow up and he starts to learn, and he realizes that he needs to try and be less like his father and more like the men that he sees in the human world. And that's where things for Aries start to change. But it takes time. It takes, hundreds, if not 1,000 years, for him to really inhabit and learn and to let go of some of that anger, which kept him as that, hated in Athens war god, that they would laugh at when he was captured and put into, a pottery urn, and then finally go, okay, let him out, or the one where he would complain to Zeus about, people harming him on the battlefield. And Zeus would be like, go home, you little, like, I don't even like you, go home. Why can't you be more like your sister Athena? And I mean, I find it hilarious that, of course, we get all of those stories when it was Athenian writers writing them. So, there you go. You can kind of look at it that way. But by the time we get to the Roman Empire, all of a sudden, Ares is not just this war god, but he is a god of quite a bit of justice, but he's also the god of the everyday man. And so you see that progression in the myths where Ares starts being seen in more savory lights. And I mean, always in places like Sparta and things like that too. But the fact that in the past, Ares was a god where soldiers would sometimes, sacrifice living beings to Ares. I'm not going to shy away from the fact that that is how he began. I'm also going to not shy away from the fact that in my novels, Ares has 2,000 plus years to have grown and to have learned certain things and to come to different conclusions, mostly through the absolute loving kindness of his consort and his lover, Aphrodite, and how her influence and the influence of having children, has really, brought him. So I think that when you look at something like the work of Edith Hamilton, when you look at that succinct and clear body of mythological works, I really do take inspiration from being as accurate as I can and then taking it from there. I'm not going to keep them in that state because that state happened a few thousand years ago and people learn, people grow over time. I think it's also important for us in the society that we're in to realize that if something, X amount of years is handled quite differently, there is still time for everybody to change and to learn and to grow and to find a better way. And that we can't just write people off because they had this view back then. If they learn a different view and they're able to honestly apologize and to kind of work on that and move forward, then we need to look at that as well. And we need to hold that and allow them that space. So I think in that way, I do like being as hearty with myths as Edith Hamilton, um, in quite a way.
Very well said, Miss Burnell. So, what are the elements that you put in your last novel of your Jazz of Mystic saga to wrap up all the books?
I have Thor returning to Midgard, you know, glorious return because he thinks he's helping. And he, in the mythology that we have, Thor's chariot was pulled by two rams that, he could slaughter and cook and eat. And as long as the bones were, kept exactly where they were, then the rams would basically just kind of reconstruct and be reborn the next morning. So, this sort of eternal cycle of food. So he realizes that, oh no, humans have modernized since the last time I was on Midgard. So instead, he thinks he's helping and being incognito like the humans do by taking his chariot and hooking it up to two Dodge Rams, which he has jerry rigged to be able to use reins to turn the wheels. And, the embarrassment of his kids be like, oh, dad, no, dad, why? That's not how you, oh man, you ride in the ram. Why would I ride in a ram? Do you know how unsensical that is? Oh my gosh. I take a very different approach to Thor. So um we have a lot of fun with that. That's a lot of fun. It also lightens and brightens things up. I have a bit of Skania, the Hall of Thor. So, Valhalla is not the only hall in Asgard. There's tons of different halls for the different figures. And so we get to see Folkvanger. We get to see Bilskirnir. We get to see other places in Asgard other than Valhalla. We do get to see Valhalla in Book of Revels, but in this one, we get to open up the world of Asgard and see a bunch of different places that don't necessarily get the same amount of attention as the Hall of Odin. And so that is a lot of fun, and reminding people that there were, two places where the honored dead could go. There was Valhalla, where they would have, endless drinking parties where every warrior had a dog. Or there was Folkvanger, this beautiful meadow of flowers where beautiful maidens were around. So you basically got to, choose. Do you want to go to the place with all the hot chicks? Or do you want to go to the place with the puppies and the beer? Like, where are we going here? So we get to do that. We also get to have a beautiful, of course it's me, so I call it a beautiful final battle between, well, in Book of Revels, we got to deal with Stana. And so that was the conclusion of Stana's arc, well, for the most part. And then in Gunungagap, we get to find the last throes of Cormac of the Willow, the evil consort of High Queen Celica of the Fae. And so we get to have that battle, and it is going to be a combination of a whole bunch of different myths and different figures, everyone from Horus to, Izanami and other such figures. And then we get to have a new bonding place where we see the Axis Mundi, aka that, connection point between all of the different realms, the world tree. We actually get to witness and see and bond with the world tree and how it branches out to connect all of these different realms together in this sense of synthesis. And we get to see the world tree pissed off. Pardon my language, but I find it fun. Nothing says, "Oh, you done messed up," than having the world tree where everything kind of clings onto it. Yggdrasil being like, "Okay, no, time to deal with this." I've let you guys do it for far too long. Now it's my turn, and you're not going to like the fact that it's my turn. And Yggdrasil is actually a character. So we get to see not only the tree itself as an actual tree, but we get to see the full expression of the character behind the world tree, which, spoilers, you can kind of see in the preceding books, the big reveal of who this character actually is. I hide it very tenuously. It's there. You can see it, but the characters around them get to realize just who the world tree actually is. And
Wow.
uh-oh, watch out.
Watch out. That's not a spoiler, right?
It's not a spoiler. No, 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 it's
Yes,
not a
no.
spoiler. I have a terrible penchant in my fiction. I want to tell all the secrets right away. I'm like, oh, I just want
Oh.
everybody to know. So for me, I think the fun of it is when a reader knows something before a character does. And so I'll share little bits and things like that. So the reader will be like, oh my gosh, whoa, hey, I saw this coming. But then they're like, when's this character going to find out? How are they going to react when they find out? And I think seeing the characters to react to certain bits of information when they receive it, I think that's where I have the most fun. Not to say that there aren't some things that are kept secret, but I do like the fun of having a reader be in on something before before some of the characters are. And then having that burst of a character suddenly realizing something and being like, "Holy, oh my goodness." What? It's like, "Yes, I saw
so
it
Miss
coming." Yeah.
yes, so Miss Burnell, you decided that this saga will be only four novels, right? Four stories. Yeah. So after 2 years that you want to decide that you want to continue this series, is it possible?
It is. And the funny thing that happened after Charnash and Son of Abel came out, I had an influx of people asking me, "Yes, but what happens to Tuya? Yes, but what?" And I just had a conversation with my editor, this past week, actually, and they want me to do a fifth novel to the series, which happens concurrently to the rest of the books. So, which happens concurrently to the end of Charnash, to Son of Abel, Book of Revels, and then Gurungagap, about Tuya and about her journey and what happens to her, and that focus on the feminine. And so we have titled it Psychopomp after,
Mm.
a psychopomp in mythology being a spirit, deity, ancestor, or some form of angel or demon. It is some form of mythological figure that acts as a conduit for the dead to go towards the afterlife. So that's what a psychopomp is, in case, it's also a song by the Tea Party, which is a really good song. But the novel's titled Psychopomp, and it's looking like it's going to be out around the same time as Agape Maki next year. So there is already
Oh
a fifth one
wow.
that is scheduled. It's not part of the quartet in well, it happens at the same time as the quartet, but because the main character of the quartet is Caleb. So this is a sort of subsequent novel which will take place at the same time as these other books, but its main character is Tuya instead. So we just revealed that we are going to have this novel called Psychopomp. We are going to be able to tell quite a few Tuya Dragonova stories of her own. And that brings in more Slavic mythology as well, which is something that's even harder to kind of get a hold of than Norse mythology, pre-Christian Norse mythology, especially, and certain things like that. There's so little Slavic folklore and mythology that exists with scholarship. I should say with scholarship, because, we have stories, but the way that the Slavic, kind of the Slavic pagan religion, the pre-Christian religions worked, we're not entirely sure about that because Christianity came so early to a lot of the Eastern European countries, and just different things like that happened. So I'm having to rely more on, especially my husband's family, who are Ukrainian, and going into the Ukrainian myths and the stories that were told and passed down from mother to mother to mother to mother, and kind of getting into Slavic myth and Slavic folklore that way. So it's an incredibly almost familial novel for me to go into more of, Makosh and Velis and Perun, and try and decipher from the limited scholarship that we do have, how everything worked and what the different stories mean. And of course, you have figures like Baba Yaga and things that everybody knows, oh yeah, the one with the chicken hut and the mortar and pestle that she flew around with. Well, yeah, but there's more to it than that we have potentially lost. So it gives me some time to be able to dive into that Eastern European folklore even more, which I love because, I'm Scandinavian, but part of me has Eastern European genetics as well that I've never until adulthood been able to really engage with. Because I was raised by my Scandinavian family. I was raised, going between Norway and Canada, although I spent most of my time in Canada. Um, as you can hear from my accent. Yeah,
Definitely.
that Vancouver accent of mine. But you get to, being an adult, learning how to explore that culture of my father's family that I was never around. Another reason why these books got written in the first place, to kind of reconnect that sense of family, but also being able to visit those stories now as an adult is a much different experience than, hearing the ghost stories of Baba Yaga that, my husband got to listen to as a kid, and he's like, no, you don't understand. No, Baba Yaga still scares me, okay? Like, still freaks me out. Like, they are these powerful narratives. So it's called Psychopomp. That'll be the one. And yes, there are ways that by the end of this saga, by the end of the quartet, there are more stories to tell. You know, um,
Yes.
so that's going to be fun. We are working on an audio drama as well that takes place before the quartet. It's called Waxwing, and I'm producing it with an incredibly talented, internationally awarded world builder by the name of Emily Armstrong. And so Emily and I are currently writing all of the scripts for Waxwing, which takes place before Charnash. It takes place before everything. And the main characters of Waxwing are Icarus and Leander. And so that's going to be going more into Icarus, Leander, Aphrodite, Ares, and all those people. And that's going to be 100% audio drama. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, definitely interesting, Miss Burnell. So, can you please invite our listeners to buy all your books?
Everyone, I would love it if you went to your local bookstore, to your library, or if you went online to saphaburnell.com and searched for my books. Please do go and purchase Char and Ash, Son of Abel. Book of Revels is out October 3rd, and Ginnungagap will be out in November. I am so looking forward to everybody reading them and falling in love with these characters as much as I have fallen in love with them. I really hope you do. You can find my books wherever books are sold, both paperback and digital. If you want more information on that, you can get it at saphaburnell.com. That is SAPHABURNELL.com. You can also find my works like Char and Ash at books2read.com/Char and Ash. And more information will be there if you search either Sapha Burnell or you search Char and Ash and the Judge of Mystic Saga. You will be able to find them. If you are in Canada, I would please urge you to talk to your local public libraries about bringing these books in. We have a fantastic program for Canadian authors called the Public Lending Rights in Canada, which helps authors maintain their ability to write by getting their books into local public libraries across the country. And that's another way to support my work. I would very much appreciate if you drop me a line at Usurper Kings, either on X, Instagram, Threads, basically anywhere on social media, including Twitch, where there is a Usurper Kings. That is me.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Sapha Burnell because Judge of Mystic Saga is one of a kind. We are comparing to Miss Madeline Miller, to Mr. Neil Gaiman, and of course, the timeless mythology by Edith Hamilton. So,
Yes.
if you support her, more books to come. And of course, you will always come back to my podcast and to promote.
Yes. Yes. And if you want to hear the entire series of podcasts episodes that we've done, that I've done with wonderful Mr. Lucas, they are listed on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and I've put the episodes specifically about the Judge of Mystic series on my website, saphaburnell.com, so you can listen straight on there as well. Please listen to Book 101 Review. It's a fantastic podcast, and it's been an absolute joy to be here. So
Yes, definitely. And thank you, listen notes, for my latest score of 26. And my podcast is belong to, well, 10% popular show globally. Miss Burnell, thank you so much for your time.
you're welcome. Thank you so much for yours.
Bodycom people, see you soon.